Welcome back. I had a request from a viewer to discuss industrial hemp. Now, I wouldn't say I'm any kind of an expert on that subject, but I know a thing or two, so I guess it's something I could talk about. After all, during World War II, the Japanese cut us off from our source of supply in the Philippines, and that was an emergency because hemp has always been a very, very important agricultural crop in the world. And so the government did issue special permits to Midwestern farmers to produce industrial hemp during World War II, and for a little while afterwards. Well, the repercussions of that were that the birds spread the seeds everywhere. So Indiana, Ohio, Missouri, Iowa, Illinois, Wisconsin, parts of Minnesota were just covered in the stuff in waste areas, roadside ditches, railroad tracks, vacant lots, you name it, edges of old farm fields. The stuff was all over the place. When we were kids, we used to, use the stalks as whips, and the stuff would get so tall in the waste areas that we'd use it as hiding places for hide and go seek. So I grew up around industrial hemp, I guess. The other second thing to say about industrial hemp is that the entire issue over cannabis just goes to show you, how despite the fact we have a government and we are supposed to obey the laws that the government issues and so on, this doesn't really mean that our government is always correct or has good judgment or even has their heads screwed on straight. You go back 70 years ago and you have just an excellent example of how industry, the government, and the media actually colluded to create hemp as a demon plant. It was DuPont that had his patent on nylon. He knew darn well, as long as there was hemp fiber around, that his nylon wouldn't have a chance in the marketplace. And so he got involved with Harry Anslinger, who was the head of a drug enforcement group with the U.S. government, and with William Randolph Hearst, the media mogul from the West Coast. And DuPont wanted to see American farmers not being able to produce hemp because if they could, his nylon wasn't going to cut it. And so they waged a smear campaign. Each and every one of them, had their own reasons why they did this. In the case of Hearst, that was, I believe, the invention of the term yellow journalism was about this particular issue. And so he smeared it in the media, and that sold newspapers for Hearst. That made him happy. Anslinger, he was a notorious racist. If you think we got racists in the government these days, you ain't seen nothing. Yeah, you go back in time and look, and boy, we had some real winners. He was one of them. He hated brown-skinned people, Mexicans in general, and so that's why we get the term marijuana in our culture, is because that was a term that was used as Mexican slang. And Anslinger wanted to focus on that particular group as being the source of all the problems in our society and their little green drug that they were burning. So he used the term, and it stuck. And I will not use the term because of its racist origins. And so I will continue to refer to this plant as cannabis. Anyway, they managed to wage a campaign that convinced everybody, including our politicians, that this was a very, very, very dangerous plant. There's no way it should ever be grown or used by anybody, despite thousands of years of history. Now, I suspect by now, maybe most of you out there have heard all this stuff, but maybe not. There's probably a lot of people who were and are as indoctrinated as I was by our government's propaganda on the issue. From my point of view, for most of my life, other than the fiber that the plant produced, which was well known, I didn't realize it had any other particular benefits at all, other than, you can get high on it, you can make a rope out of it. It was about all I knew, and it's about all they wanted us to know, I think. Now, all of a sudden, you can get CBD on a drugstore counter and so it's becoming mainstream, and we're all slowly getting used to the fact, but the point being here is that our government actually took what was one of the most important agricultural crops on earth, demonized it, and made it illegal so nobody could grow it for the benefit of, an industrial character like DuPont. Nothing's direct, it's all indirect. People are convinced to believe this or that, but it's just a great example of how your government can be completely full of, and I'll use the abbreviation BS, even though I would prefer to use the full term, how your government can be full of it, and make an act to sound like, oh, no, we're protecting you, There's a lot of this stuff, and it troubles me. It's really sad that people do this type of thing, because I have my own personal ratings on crops, all right? I look at crops in the world like bananas or like rice, or wheat or corn, and I kind of personally rate them. What is their value? How important are these things? So I've got a list of favorites out there. Definitely bananas are part of the list. Previously, I have declared many times that I love corn as a crop. I think it's a wonderful plant. I really do. But, of course, over the years, I've seldom made much mention of how much respect I have for the plant cannabis, mostly because it was very antisocial to do so, and, in fact, it was illegal to possess or use, so, why should I go there? But, as the climate is now turning, I find it completely safe to say that at the top of my list of human crop plants, I don't think there's really much better plant. Now, of course, this is an opinion, right? But just look at this. To begin with, I don't know, do most of you know out there that Columbus never would have made it to the New World if it hadn't been for cannabis? Industrial hemp is what made the ropes on his ship. It was also what made the sails on Columbus's boat. He never would have gotten lost and ended up in the Indies over here, thinking he was in India, if it hadn't been for industrial hemp. In fact, it is so deep that we refer to the plant as cannabis in Latin, but canvas is the English bastardization of the Latin cannabis. Cannabis, okay? All of our sails, all of our canvas, all of our tents, okay, all of the ropes, most of the twine, and a whole lot of other stuff that could be made out of fibers. Cannabis was the source throughout almost all of history until 70 years ago. And it was only greed that took it away from us. Greed and racism, basically, all negatives. And so it goes to show you that it comes around, it goes around, and now all of a sudden we're slowly waking back up to how badly we had been duped, and we're beginning to accept the plant again. And I am so happy. honestly, to see that this, because let's go down the list. All right. Now, cannabis comes in many, many different strains, and it also comes in several species. Even it's divided up into a few groups. At the very least, we refer to it as cannabis sativa. We refer to it as cannabis indica, and it's also referred to as cannabis ruderalis. All right. There may even be more divisions than that, but then inside those groups, there are enormous amounts of variation. This is a very genetically unstable plant, and it creates out of itself all sorts of different races as it begins to get grown in one area or in another, or selected for one purpose or another. And so, generalizing across the entire group, you have a plant that produces outstanding medicine. My stock in a British pharmaceutical company, I think it's GWPH is the ticker symbol. Oh, that one just took a great big jump, and I'm making money hand over fist because I invested in their cannabinoid research, and now they have an epilepsy drug that works. Okay. Well, guess what? It was 2,000 years ago, and the Emperor of China had, in his pharmacopoeia that he had developed, had listed cannabis as a cure for seizures. We've known this for 2,000 years, okay? And it was only foolish acts by our government that negated any of that information. But here you have a plant that produces great medicine, all right? So it can replace a lot of pharmacy. The plant produces extraordinary recreational intoxication that really has no lethal overdose, like the supposedly safer alcohol, which you can't poison yourself on. It's essentially not addictive physically, so it's relatively safe to use this as an intoxicant. So you got medicines, you have recreational drugs, you have fibers, and from the fibers, because they are such high quality and they're so strong, you can make almost anything that fiber can produce. And so this means you can make t-shirts out of it, every bit as good as cotton. And I mean, if you look back over the history of raising cotton and fighting the boll weevil and the DDT and the chemicals and the burned out soils and wasted farms from the production of cotton, cotton isn't the greatest thing in the world, and hemp actually generally doesn't use quite as much fertilizer and will generally grow with less pest problems, and so it's a better alternative. The fiber makes the best rope on earth, mountain climbing ropes and such, really high quality ropes, still today. Even with DuPont fighting it, they're still made from hemp. Canvas is still from cannabis, real canvas. So anytime you got canvas out there, you're holding the piece of cloth that was made from the hemp plant. The fiber is also such high quality is that you can use it for the best of papers. And if you are aware of how many trees are felled every year in this nation just to create paper, and we waste so much paper. It has very little value to us, we burn it, throw it away, fill the trash cans with it, and so on. And so instead of cutting down forests, you could be raising cannabis for the production of paper. So you got clothing, fabrics, ropes, and all sorts of other things that can be made. Paper can be made from this fiber. But then you have the seed. All right. Well, the seed in hemp is edible, not just by animals and birds and such. It's edible by human beings. It tastes pretty good. I'll imagine by now there's a percentage of y'all out there that have probably had like hemp granola or something on that order. I know there's hemp milk out there, for instance. and stuff. I've eaten plenty of hemp granola. It's good stuff. There's nothing wrong with it. It's a high protein seed, but the seed also contains a tremendous amount of high quality oil. So we're going back here now. Let's start back at the beginning. We got pharmaceuticals, okay? We have recreational drugs, all right? We have fiber that can be turned into all manner of things, paper, cloth, ropes, and so forth. You have seeds that not only taste good, but they produce high quality protein, and so you can feed people, you can feed animals with the seeds. But then it makes oil, and the oil is extremely high quality. It can be used for cosmetics, for paints, for plastics, blah, 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 lubrication, any place you could use a really good oil. You know, you can lube your AK with it, right? What a world we live in. And so, I mean, that's huge. That's huge. Yeah, corn makes a lot of stuff. You know, and there's a lot of value to rice and so on, and almost every one of our great agricultural crops have multiple applications. But I don't really think anything that can be grown in a farm field, say in the central U.S., that can produce so many possible different types of products. Now, of course, when I refer to this, I'm talking about many different races and strains of this plant, all right? They're all one thing, yet they're not quite. And so, as far as industrial hemp is concerned, there are three basic types. We have the types that are grown for fiber, that produce really nice, long, straight stalks, you know, and that produce nice fiber. We have the type that is grown for the oil seed, all right? And so these don't necessarily produce such great stalks, but they do produce high yields of really good seeds that are high in oil content. Then there are some European races that are hybrids between those two, and so they actually produce both. They have some dual purpose hemp. I understand from reports, though, that the hybrid dual purpose hemps don't produce seed as well as the seed types, nor do they produce fiber as well as the fiber types. But they will produce both on a single plant. The government has finally come to its senses, and they are allowing farmers the ability to go back and grow this crop. Now, I was looking at the prices of hemp fiber and the prices of hemp seed earlier today. They're kind of all over the place, and I'm not going to bother making any quotes, but it does appear that these don't really have a real high value. They're probably more valuable now than they will be in the future, because as production increases, of course, there won't be any scarcity. Right now, sometimes people have a hard time finding enough hemp fiber for what they're doing or enough hemp seed for what they're trying to do because of the prohibitions. But we're catching up, and meaning that this is kind of a crop that fits into the, the corn, soybeans, wheat niche, okay? Is that you had best have quite a bit of land, and you're going to produce a lot of tonnage to be able to make a reasonable profit on the plant. It's just not that valuable. If you want to make a lot of money on cannabis, of course, you're going to go into the drug trade or the medicine trade. There it has really high value yet. But as far as the industrial hemp product, this is not something that I think that's suited to the small farmer. You're going to be wanting to plow in 500 to 1,000 acres or more of this stuff, I think, to be able to make a decent living off of it. But whatever. That aside, there are some myths, I guess. It's gotten a reputation as a weed. We call it weed, in fact. But and I have contributed to this because, as I said, where I grew up, this stuff it just kind of grew all over the place. And of course, just about any pocket of soil in Illinois, it's pretty good stuff. Anybody who's ever been there will agree that Illinois does happen to have some of the finest native soils on the planet. So, the fact that hemp grew in all the roadsides and ditches and railroad grades and stuff, I suppose, wasn't too surprising. Soil and growing conditions there are quite good. But that aside, it does take at least a moderate fertilizer level, less than corn, all right, less than corn, but more than wheat. And so it's going to take a fair fertilizer application. Hopefully the soils you're working with are fairly good and reasonably deep with decent water retention. Hemp will grow much better on clay soils, clay loam soils, silt loam soils, than it will on sandy soils. You'd have to have a clay subsoil or something on a sandy soil to hold enough moisture for this crop. Whereas it is more drought tolerant than corn, it thrives with abundant moisture. Biggest plants I've ever seen in my life were growing out of just black, deep ooze along a creek bank outside of Brunswick, Missouri. I was riding my bicycle through there in the 1970s with a good buddy of mine, and as we were approaching the bridge for this creek, I looked over and I went, "Oh my God, Alex, look at that! It's a 12-foot high marijuana plant, And, oh, wow, man, look at that thing. Then I got off my bicycle and I looked down and realized, no, man, there was 8 foot of stem going down below the road grade anchored at the bank of a creek. So it was a 20-foot high plant. It was enormous. I never seen anything like it. It's a tree. I actually went and wrapped the plant all around me. I had it coming out through my armpits and every place, through my mouth. And then my buddy took a photograph, which became a poster that most of us had throughout the 70s and 80s in our wall. Alex enlarged them, and gave them out for Christmas. Yeah. Yeah, green garden guy, just completely surrounded by the stuff. It gets pretty big, though, okay, if given right soil and enough moisture, is the point. And because of its weed status, it's usually considered to be almost bulletproof when it comes to pests, but, that's not really true either. Most of the pests that will attack the cannabis are probably not going to really affect the crop that much. We get omnivorous leaf rollers, little caterpillars that roll the leaves up and stuff, and they'll eat some of the flowers. And so if you're doing seed production, they can get in there and mess up some of your yield, I guess. So, maybe a treatment for caterpillars if you're raising it for seed. If it's being raised for fiber, the caterpillars can't really hurt that aspect. The bigger problems really are two fungus. Yeah, there's a sclerotina and there's a botrytis. Botrytis is really common. Most of the medical and recreational grower guys know this stuff is bud rot. It's a fungus, dark brown fungus that would just eat right through the flowers and just dissolve them. And so there are some pest problems, particularly fungal diseases, that need to be addressed. So it's not the reputation that it doesn't need fertilizer, will grow anywhere on anything, and doesn't need maintenance. That's not really correct. It's like any other crop. You're going to have to take care of your field if you want a good yield. But, as I say, the laws are coming around. Now CBD has become legal, and I'm not exactly sure where we want to class CBD as, whether that's part of industrial hemp or whether that's part of medicinal cannabis. It could be either. Technically, I guess it should be. Now, I don't know this, but it should be entirely possible, even in a field grown for fiber or in a field grown for the seed, to also be able to extract CBD from these plants. That should be possible. On the other hand, we have a lot of strains that were bred specifically for high CBD content with very, very, very low or non-existent THC content. So you got a lot of options here, folks. Really, if you want to be into farming and doing industrial hemp now that it's a legal thing to do, there are a lot of different directions you can go, specialized types of markets. I mean, definitely right now, CBD is just hotter than all get out. And I guess if you have equipment on farm to be able to process this stuff so that what you're shipping off of the farm is high quality finished fiber, ready to use, or clean seed or oil from the seed, or producing CBD in a pure form, I mean, that's the hottest place to be if you're an agriculturalist, is that you're planting seeds, but coming out the back door on the farm, you have a finished product ready to go. You cut out a whole lot of middlemen, and you make a whole lot more money when you're doing that kind of business. And so I think that's what I'd be focusing on if I was looking at industrial hemp. I would say that just about any place in the United States where corn and soybeans grow well, that these would be the prime places for the production of industrial hemp. Some places where you don't see real good corn, like say Kentucky, for instance, Kentucky still has soils adequate enough in places to be able to grow good crops of hemp. So it's not as demanding as corn. So it will move into some land that's a little more marginal than what would make a good cornfield. But by and large, you should probably be able to produce the stuff anywhere from Maine across the northern tier, heading west until it starts to get a little bit too dry. I probably wouldn't bother much, west of Dakotas. That would probably be as far out as I would consider taking this process until you cross the Rockies and you get towards the Pacific Northwest, and of course Washington, Oregon, BC, California, of course, suitable places. I think there's probably a few parts of Idaho with irrigation. There's some irrigated west that it would also grow pretty well in. Generally is not a desert crop, and you may find you get too many fungal problems as you start to get down in the deep south. And so I don't think it's the greatest crop for places like Mississippi or Georgia, but it could also be grown there. If I was to pick a spot, it's probably the same place where it went wild during World War II. So, I mean, Ohio, Indiana, Missouri, Illinois, Iowa, Kansas, Wisconsin, Michigan, Minnesota. I maybe I've left some. The parts of Nebraska also. Yeah, in fact, the Nebraska Sandhills region is completely covered in that stuff. I drove through there one time just to see what the sandhills were about. Man, is there a lot of hemp growing in the sandhills. So they must have grown a lot of it in Nebraska during the war, too, apparently. Then, of course, the other issue is, are you raising this plant for the fiber, or are you raising it for the seed? If you're raising it for the fiber, I would think you can push the crop pretty far north, well into Saskatchewan maybe even, because you don't have to worry about the flowering. That's not an important issue. All you got to do is get nice, big, thick, heavy stalks. But if you're raising it for the seed, then you're going to be a little more limited, because let's take, say, the state of Indiana. With the kind of daylight and stuff they have in Indiana, most of the industrial hemp isn't really going to begin to flower very much until about August. And so you can put it in a little bit ahead of corn. And so let's say if I was in Indiana, I suppose I could sow the seeds in the field maybe in April. But it's going to take all the way to about August for it to begin to flower. And then after the flowering, it has to produce the ripe seed, and so it has to ripen itself out. Your harvest will probably be taken in somewhere, a little bit after frost. You don't want the birds eating it all, and you don't want it shattering in the field. So the plants apparently would have to still be somewhat green in order to hold the seed together when they're being brought in. anyway, the plant is more tolerant to frost than crops like corn, for instance, or soybeans, and so it will hold longer in a field in fall. It can take a few freezes. Uh, that was how we used to do the annual census in southern Wisconsin. If you drive down Route 14 near Janesville, Wisconsin, for instance, in October, after the frost had hit all the pumpkins and the corn, right, the cannabis is still bright green in all the ditches, and so that will be the one green plant seen everywhere across the countryside. If you want to find out how much hemp grows wild in the Midwest, just drive down Route 14 in Wisconsin in October. You'll get a good headful. Yeah, so then when it comes to producing fiber, like I say, the flowering is irrelevant and seeding is irrelevant. But if you're trying to produce seeds, cannabis is a dioecious plant. It means males are on one plant, females are on another. All right. Well, the male plants are actually agriculturally worthless for any purpose except the pollination of females for seeding. All right. So they will senesce and die away long before the rest of the crop is ripe. They come on very early, they pollinate, they fall apart, they die. And so they're actually not harvested. A lot of the seed varieties that are being bred today tend to be a high percentage of female they're breeding for. So you don't have too many males out there. They often will actually include specific amount or percentage of male seed in these batches so that you have good pollination, but not too much pollination. If there's too many males in the field, your yield declines. In one of my last videos, while talking about sexual freedom for cannabis, I had one gentleman brought up a somewhat serious concern where I was advocating actually producing live seed and having both male and female plants, even when you're raising medicine or drugs, so you can control your seed source, blah, blah, blah. Well, he was kind of upset because he figures if the neighbors got pollen on the other side of the fence, that it could cross-contaminate his Simpsomia, and ruin his crop. Well, I guess I understand his point. I'm not going to argue that can't happen. Of course, cross-contamination of pollen is a big deal these days since they began growing genetically engineered rape for canola, genetically engineered corn, which the pollen goes everywhere, and so on. The pollen from the corn, the pollen from the rape has drifted out of the genetically engineered fields and fallen into fields where people were growing organic corn or organic rape. In the past, the lawsuits have not been in favor of the poor farmers that picked up the contamination, mostly, because Monsanto has had an army of lawyers. Now I assume that Bayer bought Monsanto, that Bayer will have an army of lawyers for this. But as production of medical cannabis, recreational cannabis, and especially industrial hemp increase, now that these things are all gradually becoming legal and socially acceptable, the drifting of pollen can really get to be an issue in time. In general, most of the medical cannabis is being grown indoors in warehouses under lights so they can completely control all aspects of it. But that is not necessarily so with the recreational cannabis. There are a lot of guys in California, Oregon, Washington, and so on that are doing completely legal outdoor grows, producing, recreational cannabis. And of course, if some guy opens up a industrial hemp farm next door and the male pollen starts drifting in on top of the guy doing the recreational cannabis, not only is he going to end up with seeds in the females that he didn't want, but those seeds will be completely worthless because they'll have been cross-contaminated with, industrial hemp, then just killing the potency of the stuff. And so, it's an issue. We'll be facing that one, I'm sure. I'm sure with the value of recreational cannabis, medical cannabis, and so on, there'll be lawsuits. Lawyers, get ready, We have see television commercials, right? While you're watching the nightly news of lawyers that will take up class action suits on pollen. Yeah, we'll see it. I bet we will. There you go. There's a little bit about industrial hemp production. Aloha. Y'all have a great time and hang loose.